it slows down. And I swear to God, for a moment, I thought I was in the Matrix, because I just kind of stood there and I turned and looked as that fist just slowly floated past me. Regardless of how long you train in the martial arts or how many drills you run, it's incredibly hard to develop sparring and fighting skills unless you're working with another person. Or is it? Now, before we get started, I want to make a very clear disclaimer. I am not saying that you can replace live training with a resisting partner. What I am saying is it is possible to improve your fighting skills, at least to some degree, on your own using technology. This is the Oculus Quest 2 headset, also known as the Meta Quest 2, and this is, for the record, not a sponsored video. This is just my personal opinion with my experience with the device. Virtual reality has been the subject of science fiction and escapist fantasy for decades, but I think that we've reached a point where it can really be a productive tool, and if you take advantage of it, what it offers, it can improve your sparring as well. So we're going to take a quick look at what VR fighting offers, recognize what it lacks, and then I'm going to show you a couple of ways you can use it to hack and upgrade your own sparring. Also, for those of you who feel you've got a very keen sense of awareness and vision, we have hidden an image of White Belt Zach somewhere in this episode from this point going forward. So let's see if you can find it, and the first person to find it first with the time code will get their comment pinned in the comment section down below. Let's get to it. For the majority of what we're discussing today, I will be referring to the Thrill of the Fight, which is one of my personal favorite VR applications. But what kind of advantages does virtual reality fighting actually offer? Well, first of all, solo training time, as long as you want. You know, I used to struggle to find partners. My school was closing left and right, and when it was open, half the time we didn't have people sparring. So I found myself on a lot of occasions not having sparring partners to work with, and that sucked. And there's a lot of people out there who don't have access to sparring partners, or maybe you want to spar more or just spend some time experimenting. So the first benefit is this gives you a chance to work on your own schedule when you want, as long as you want. So you can put as much training in as you feel you need or just want to do. This is also an incredibly safe way to practice sparring. You're not going to hurt yourself because you're not actually getting hit. Now, of course, being virtual reality, please be sure that you abide by the safety measures of the system, that you don't go running into walls and TVs and all that good stuff. There are safety guidelines built into the system, so as long as you abide by those, you should be fine. But you're not going to have anybody actually punching and hitting you, so you don't have to worry about you taking damage and injuries. It's more about you focusing your strategies and concepts. This is a sandbox for you. Now, there's a lot of games that offer different benefits. Some of them are weapon and combat oriented, like Blade and Sorcery Nomad. A game like this is really cool because it kind of tests your timing. It makes you read your opponent a little bit. It's got limited grappling, and I wouldn't say it's got full grappling, but it's got some limited options in there. And it's just kind of a good application just to engage in a one-on-one opponent or multiple attackers. These applications also help you develop an awareness of a 360-degree environment, because this is not a standard 2D game where the action is just right in front of you like a platformer. In this type of setting, there are virtual opponents that can be literally anywhere around you. So some games will have you turn it around, and you have to keep track of who's around you where. And it's interesting because sometimes you really do get that sense of enclosure. I put my wife in the headset once, and we were doing a drunken bar fight game, and she couldn't take it for more than a minute because she said that she didn't like the feeling of being surrounded by these unknown people, as creepy graphics as it is. But it does kind of give you that sense of you need to be aware of what's going on around you at all times. And some games can just be flat out fun and make you feel like you're actually in an arcade beat 'em up, or they can be silly and just have like more of a cathartic experience if you want to get a little bit of a workout but have more fun on top of it. So you got a lot of options out there in terms of what applications you want to use. My personal favorite, again, is Thrill of the Fight. I find it to be a pretty darn realistic boxing game. So those of you who have not tried it, I highly recommend you give it a shot, because it does engage you more than you think that it would. And especially with a game like that, it gives you a true sense of personal space and immersion. Even with the rudimentary graphics, it feels like someone, or at least something, is actually in front of you, and your brain registers it as real. Even though the graphics are a little bit more rudimentary and comical, once you're playing in it with the depth and the motion, it actually does feel like a person is in your personal space. So it does give you that sense of presence. And that's something really hard to do, and that's rarely seen in video games. And for anyone who has tried this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Seeing it on the 2D image and seeing footage of me playing back right now does not do it justice of how it feels to be actually in it. Next, the customization is awesome. So something like Thrill of the Fight, they have a lot of settings that you can customize, and that helps you because now you can work on specific elements. You can go for an all-out brawl and fight, or you could select certain things and settings if you just want to practice, or you can even just do virtual speed bags or whatever you want. There's a lot of options in there to customize and set goals of what you specifically want to practice and work on. Now we're going to come back to these customizable settings because that's where a lot of today's topic gets into. Also, one of my favorite things is, even though you're playing a video game, you will work up a sweat. You will burn calories and you will get tired. Other channels have covered this, showing professional boxers and fighters such as Steve Wonderboy Thompson trying this, and after they play a few rounds, they're drenched afterwards. So this is not a sit down, play, casual type of game. You will get a workout playing this. Okay, so now let's talk about what VR fighting lacks. The big thing is it lacks actual contact. That haptic feedback is good for registering a hit. You know, you actually have these remote controls that when you hit your opponent, they vibrate, so it kind of gives your brain a signal saying, okay, I made contact with an object, but it doesn't feel like you're actually striking a person or striking a bag. It's just a little bit of a hint so that you can register the action. And of course, when they hit you, the screen will flash and all that, but you're not actually getting hit. So the one thing it lacks is the real contact. And sometimes that tactile feedback is important for real sparring because the way you respond in real life, actually getting hit, it's going to be different than if your screen just kind of virtually flashes and you pretend you got hit. So it will change your strategy a little bit, but overall it's still great for reflexes, but it's terrible for conditioning because you will not have that tactile feedback returning hits. And again, getting hit in real life triggers a very real stress response that changes the way you fight, and that's kind of lacking in applications like this. And the one feature for this game that I really wish was there and it's not is Thrill of the Fight does not have a two-player mode, which would be so cool if there were two players, if you can go online and play actual opponents. But they are saying that they're working on the follow-up game and that feature will be added in there because that would be cool if some of us could connect if you guys wanted to spar virtually. Looking forward to that. There's also a limitation on the physics, depending on what game you're playing. Thrill of the Fight is much better, but being a boxing-oriented game, you can't grapple, you can't kick, there's really no foot tracking in the Oculus Quest, or you can't really grab and manipulate their arms, so you actually can't like trap and pull and hold. You can do blocks, you can do checks, and you can do dodges and all that. So it's limited to boxing basics, but in my opinion, that's okay, because that gives you a great opportunity to focus and refine your absolute fundamental basics, your basic combinations, your basic dodges. That stuff is going to translate to your real life. I just kind of wish there was a little bit more options there where you could grab an arm or kind of manipulate the body a little bit more, but who knows? Let's watch the games that are coming out. There's more and more applications coming out that might offer things like that. Okay, so now that we've gone through the pros and cons, let's talk about hacking your sparring. How could you actually use this beyond just being a video game and a workout? How could you use this as a productive tool to improve your fighting tactics? Well, this is where I want to go back to the customizable settings that you can use in Thrill of the Fight. This game has a lot of options that you can use to enhance your own sparring. And at the end of this, after we go through this, I'm going to show you and tell you how I use it a couple times, and that actually helped my own Kempo sparring. I was able to apply some Kempo concepts to this, and we'll get to that in a minute. You can also adjust the aggression of the opponent. They can just stand there and just try to block, and that way you can just fight them and kind of work on combinations, work on your footwork, look for openings, or you can really juice them up when they're launching an assault at you. And anywhere in between. So you've got that control. You control the aggression. You control the damage control. So you can adjust how much damage they take, how much damage you take. You can also limit what they throw. You can tell them to only throw jabs, or only throw crosses, or only do uppercuts, or only do hooks, or kind of do a mixture of which. So you can control the balance and percentage of what attacks they throw. So if you're working on slipping punches, or if you're working on bobbing and weaving, you can tell them to only throw those hook punches, and you can work on that drill. And of course, on top of that, you can control the aggression level of that. So you can just isolate a particular attack and make them mild or make them super aggressive. Your choice. But my favorite setting, I think, has to be, it's so stupid simple, but I think is incredibly useful, is you can change the speed of the attacker. You can slow them down, you can speed them up, you can put them at normal speed, but if you can slow them down, this gives you a good chance to read your opponent, because the game, the characters, the opponents do have small tells for telegraphing. So if they've got their hands up, you know, they'll drop the shoulder before throwing the punch. So slowing it down gives you that ability to kind of read and anticipate. And it's really kind of cool, because the first time I did it, I limited it to jabs, and that character throw a jab, like he moves around, and when he goes to throw that punch 𝗘𝗖𝗘𝗘𝗦, it slows down. And I swear to God, for a moment, I thought I was in the Matrix, because I just kind of stood there and I turned and looked as that fist just slowly floated past me, and then all the targets were open, and it was fair game. So when you use all these features together, you got the slow motion, you can change the aggression level, you can change what they throw. Those combinations right there give you a highly customizable and individualized training session based on whatever it is that your objective is and that you want to practice. So if you do this on your own and you spend some real time here, I'm not talking about 5 minutes, but if you spend a couple hours, just a few hours a week or even longer, you will sharpen your timing and reaction, and that skill does carry over into actual sparring. How do I know that? Because I use this as an example and as an experiment to test my own Kempo sparring with it. I knew I had I had a sparring session coming up in a couple of days, so I figured, you know what, let me practice over the weekend with the headset a couple times, let me do some of these slow down drills and see what I can come up with. So talking about the limited basics, obviously, with Kempo, we've got a lot of grabs, parries, strikes, holds, takedowns. You can't do that in this game. So it does limit me to the basic combos, almost basically Street Fighter rules, jabs, cross, uppercuts. Learn to defend against it, learn to work with what's thrown at you. So I took a lot of my early Kempo moves and I converted a lot of the strikes, like the palm heels and the grabs, to punches, something like 5 swords. I did it with punches instead. And then I tried to work that into the game, and I slowed the moves down, and I looked for openings, and I looked for timing, and I kind of tried to see where can I modify techniques to apply them into simple basic combinations that would work in a setting like this. It also works your distance. So this game, like I said, you really do feel like you've got this personal space, and the characters like to advance on you, and I find myself either having to gain distance and work my way backwards, or push them back. It's like if I want that distance, I have to create it. Or if they're a little bit further back, I need to close it. So I use my footwork, I use my Kempo combinations, I use my entry moves to kind of practice here. If they were on top of me, I tried to move around. I moved around the circle, stepped up the circle, whatever I had to do. It gave me an additional objective. I'm not just going to stand there and try a combination. I had to move and use my footwork too. So in this particular experiment, I really wanted to focus on working on my defense against their lead hand and sharpen my counters through that. So what I did was I set it to slow motion, like first really slow motion, and I put the aggression up, and I said to only use their lead hand. So all they threw were jabs. And for about 30 minutes to an hour, the first session, I practiced slipping that punch, going to the outside, or going to the inside with punching combinations. I used just the timing, and I tried to look for openings. It was a non-pressure setting. It was just for me to kind of observe and play with the options and see what I was there or I had available. And I did the same thing with the rear hand. I had him do those 3 rear hand round punches and hooks, and I did things like 5 swords. And I slowed it down and I converted it to punches, and I got it working within the game, and it just helps you work out timing. And then after you do this for slow motion, what I did was after a while, I sped it back up to full speed, and then I got a really full workout out of it. And yes, I still took several hits in the game, but I found myself able to dodge and slip and kind of counter a little bit better than I did at the beginning. So that told me, in theory, if I kept doing this over and over and over, I'm only going to develop that skill that I can work on my own whenever I want to. So then, like 2 days later, when I actually went to do the actual live sparring session, I noticed a dramatic improvement in my defense against their lead hands. That those drills work, the slipping the punches or doing the jamming the punches or just being able to read what was coming at me. I was able to pick up more telegraphing. I did a lot more parries, I did a lot more blocks, I did a lot more slips, I did a lot more jams. I noticed that I was able to pull off more combos. I got them working. I got some basic Kempo techniques, those like including shielding hammer and 5 swords. I modified them into smaller pieces, and I got them working in a real sparring match as I did in the game. So I saw an immediate translation. I saw an immediate response from what I had practiced virtually over a couple of hours, and then a couple of days later in a real sparring match, those tactics worked. Now, I had to, of course, modify stuff because each person I fought didn't fight the same way as a virtual opponent, but the ideas were there. My observation was sharper, my reaction was sharper, my anticipation was better, and I just noticed a little notch up in my ability this time. So I'm definitely going to keep doing that because I think there's a lot of viable experimentation to do here. Now, I'm not saying I had the advantage by any means. Even though I saw an improvement in my own ability, my sparring partners still dealt me plenty of punishment. But overall, as an initial test to see what it offered and then finding that the skills did transfer into real sparring, I can't recommend this enough. I mean, this is great for people who are training on their own and can't spar with other people, or maybe working rehab and you're not able to spar with other people right now, Or you do, and you just want to put in some additional hours a week and you don't have someone available, or you feel like training at 4 in the morning, or when you get up in the morning, or when you come home for lunch, for work, whatever. If the option is yours, you can put in additional training whenever you want and however you want. So we've come a long way with virtual reality, and there are more combat-based games on the horizon, so I really recommend giving this a try. It's affordable, it's self-contained. This is, again, not a sponsored spot. This is my own personal observation. I've been using the headset for about 1.5 years now. I freaking love it. I use it all the time. It's comfortable to use. So if you guys are interested, I do have a link down in the description where you can pick up your own. And if you do, let me know what your experience is and what you think. And hey, maybe one day we can find a game that's 2 players or multiple players and we can face off with each other on a digital mat. That would be fun. So thanks again, guys, for watching. I really appreciate it. That's going to be all for today. And don't forget, for those of you who try to find secrets and have a keen eye, let's test your observation. Try to find this picture of White Belt Zach. He's hidden somewhere in this episode. The first person to find it, let me know where it is and a timestamp where you found it, and we'll pin your comments. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.